Before this story continues, please allow me to make one important thing clear. The story you are about to hear is a work of fiction created for entertainment and educational purposes. It explores toxic family dynamics and their emotional impact within the context of military life and American military families. All characters, ranks, units, events, and situations are entirely fictional and do not reflect, or refer to any real individual unit or organization within the United States Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, or Coast Guard. Portions of this content may be supported by AI tools during the creative process. This story does not depict real events, does not disclose military information, and does not promote violence, hatred, or harm of any kind. It is told with respect for the core values of the United States military, including honor, discipline, responsibility, and human dignity. All content is advertiser-friendly and compliant with YouTube community guidelines, and it is not intended to misrepresent or damage the reputation of the U.S. military or its service members. If you are a woman who has ever stood quietly behind a military family, who has carried more than anyone noticed, who learned to endure without being seen, I invite you to stay until the end. And if this story speaks to you, share your thoughts in the comments or follow the channel to continue walking alongside stories for strong hearts that are rarely heard. My name is Reese. I am 26 years old Army. I am not fragile, not loud, not the kind of person who explains herself unless there is a reason. I live near Killeen, Texas, the kind of town where flags hang from porches year-round, and nobody asks too many questions if you come and go at odd hours. Walmart parking lots at dawn, quiet streets lined with pickup trucks, a flagpole in almost every yard. Military towns have a rhythm. You either learn it, or it learns you. My family lives 10 minutes away. My brother Tyler is 28, National Guard, recently promoted. My mother Diane is the kind of woman who smooths rough edges until everything looks fine from the outside. My stepfather Gary cares deeply about appearances, and very little about people he cannot control. There is also my aunt, my mother's sister, the one who tells the truth too plainly and is quietly labeled difficult for it. I work at a level my family does not ask about, and I do not offer details. Not secrecy, just boundaries. The betrayal did not arrive with shouting or slammed doors. It arrived quietly like most real ones do. I was standing in my garage, still in a faded PT shirt, keys in my hand, when my phone buzzed. A message from someone I barely talk to anymore. "Hey, are you already here? They are saving a seat for family." I stared at the screen, confused, then scrolled up as another message came through with a photo attached. A backdrop with my brother's name, promotion, banners, a printed guest list taped to a folding table. My name was not there. I checked the timestamp. Tonight. I had not been invited. Before I could process that, my phone rang. "Gary." I answered. "It is just a gathering," he said, casual, dismissive. "Do not make it weird. Tyler does not need distractions today." His words were calm, practiced, like he had already explained this to himself enough times that it sounded reasonable. I said nothing. I did not argue. I did not ask why my presence counted as a distraction. I looked again at the photo on my phone. The chairs set up the space where family was meant to sit. In that moment, something in me tightened. Not anger, not surprise, but recognition. This was not an oversight. It was a decision. And I understood something else just as clearly. I did not need revenge. I did not need to confront anyone in a driveway or demand an explanation that would be rewritten later. I only needed to stop letting them tell my story for me. There is a way the military teaches you to handle moments like this. You do not escalate emotionally. You do not announce your pain. You follow protocol. And when you do, the truth has a way of arriving on its own, without noise, without permission, and without you needing to raise your voice. If you have ever been excluded, politely, lied to, gently, and told it was for everyone's comfort, stay with me. Because what happened next was not loud, but it changed everything. The party itself was never meant to be subtle. That became clear the more I learned, piece by piece, the way you learn something painful, not all at once, but in fragments that refuse to line up neatly. Tyler's promotion party was held at the community center on the edge of town, the nicer one with the polished floors and the wall of framed unit photos near the entrance. They had rented it for the evening, not cheap, not extravagant, but deliberate. 2 American flags flanked the small stage where the speeches would be given. A photographer had been hired, one of those local professionals who knows how to make everything look formal and warm at the same time. There were printed programs, nothing fancy, just enough to signal that this was not in fact just a gathering. It was a moment meant to be remembered. I knew all this because I had helped with similar events before. I knew the cadence, the unspoken rules, the way military families mark milestones. I also knew the cost, not just in money, but in labor. And that was where the imbalance began to show itself quietly at first. Diane had spent the week before the party fussing over Tyler's uniform, making sure everything was pressed just right, driving back and forth between the house and the dry cleaner, asking my opinion on nothing while still expecting my help with everything. She asked me to pick up decorations, to make a run to the store for extra bottled water, to print a few documents she had forgotten to handle earlier. I did it without comment, the way I always had. I had driven Tyler to appointments when his schedule got tight. I had helped him with paperwork he did not want to read carefully. I had watched my niece for entire afternoons so Diane could focus on planning. I had covered small bills without being asked because it made things easier. And yet when it came time to decide who would be in the room, who would sit where family was supposed to sit, my role quietly shifted from sister to support staff. The language changed too subtle enough that it almost sounded reasonable if you did not look at it directly. Gary was the one who started saying it out loud. "You always bring the mood down," he said one afternoon while Diane was folding napkins at the kitchen table. Not angry, just matter of fact, like he was stating the weather. "Your job makes people uncomfortable," he added, glancing at me like the discomfort was something I carried on my clothes. "This is Tyler's moment. Do not compete." I remember standing there, leaning against the counter, listening. I did not argue. I did not defend myself. I watched Diane's hands pause for half a second before she kept folding. That pause told me more than any speech could have. They were already rehearsing a version of reality where my absence was not just acceptable but necessary. The escalation did not come from shouting or insults. It came from justification. Gary framed everything as concern for Diane's feelings, concern for Tyler's career, concern for how things would look. He said it would be awkward if people asked too many questions about my work. He said it would distract from the celebration if I showed up and someone made a joke that did not land right. He said I did not understand how fragile these moments could be, and the soft threat sat just beneath the surface of every sentence. If I showed up, I would make Diane look bad. If I showed up, I would risk embarrassing Tyler in front of people who mattered. It was never said outright, but the implication was clear. If something went wrong, it would be my fault. I absorbed it the way I had absorbed so many things before. I watched. It hurt, but I kept it inside, filed away with all the other moments where my usefulness had been welcomed and my presence had been treated like a liability. There was a bitter irony in how familiar it felt. I had been counted on for logistics, for labor, for money when things got tight. But when the room needed to look clean and uncomplicated, I was suddenly too much. Gary said not to make it weird. In this house, the weirdest thing was how easily they called exclusion keeping the peace. The closer the party got, the more coordinated their story became. That was the part that finally settled it for me. It was not just that I was not invited. It was that everyone seemed to know exactly why, and that why sounded identical no matter who was speaking. Reese is on duty. Reese had a work thing come up. Reese could not make it because of her schedule. I heard it echoed back through texts from relatives, through casual comments that drifted my way without anyone realizing I was listening. The explanation was too smooth, too consistent. It had been practiced. This was not a misunderstanding or a last-minute decision. It was a script. They had written me out ahead of time and handed everyone the same lines. That realization landed heavier than the initial betrayal. Because a misunderstanding can be cleared up. A script cannot. A script means intention. It means planning. It means someone decided that my role in this family was conditional and that condition had not been met. I stood in my driveway that evening watching Diane load boxes into the back of her car. The decorations carefully packed the flags wrapped in protective sleeves. She looked tired, but satisfied, like someone who believed she was doing the right thing. I did not stop her. I did not ask again. I already knew the answer. The injustice was not loud. It did not announce itself. It sat there in the open, normalized, defended, smoothed over with polite language and concerned tones. And that was what made it so hard to swallow, because anyone watching from the outside would have said they were just trying to protect a moment. Anyone who had lived through it knew better. This was not protection. It was erasure, dressed up as care. By the time I went inside, I understood something with a clarity that surprised me. They were not afraid I would ruin the party. They were afraid I would remind people that I existed. Do not leave yet, because what they prepared to say about me next is the kind of thing that makes every former service member clench their jaw. I waited until the house was quiet before I called my mother. Not because I was afraid of Gary hearing, but because I needed to hear her without the noise of the kitchen, the clatter of planning, the soft distraction she used like a shield. It was late enough that the sun had already dropped behind the rooftops, and early enough that I knew she would still be awake, folding something, arranging, something, making sure the evening would look perfect for everyone who mattered. She answered on the second ring, voice already bright, already performed. "Hi, sweetie." I kept my tone controlled, not cold, not pleading, just steady. "Mom, am I invited to Tyler's promotion party tonight?" There was a pause. A small one, but long enough to feel like a door closing carefully so it would not slam. "Reese," she started, and the way she said my name had that soft warning built into it, the one that meant do not make this harder. "I asked a simple question," I said. "Am I invited?" She exhaled like she was tired, like my clarity was exhausting. "Honey, it is complicated," she said. "It is a gathering, you know that." I felt my jaw tighten. 65 people, a photographer, flags, speeches. That is not a gathering. Another pause, then the sound I had started to recognize as her choosing a version of the truth that would require the least accountability. "We just thought," she began. And then Gary's voice cut in sharp and immediate, too close to the receiver. "Give me that." I heard movement, the muffled shift of a phone being taken from her hand, and then his breathing filled the line like a presence stepping between me and her. "Reese," he said, as if we were discussing a schedule change, "you are not invited." He delivered it like a fact, not a cruelty. I did not react. I let the silence sit. He filled it quickly, because people who control narratives cannot tolerate quiet. Because you cannot just be happy for someone, he continued. Every time there is a milestone, you find a way to bring some kind of mood with you. You always bring the room down. I stared at the wall of my living room, the blank space above the couch where I had never bothered to hang anything. My heartbeat stayed even. My voice stayed level. "What exactly have I done to Tyler," I asked, "that would make me a problem at his promotion?" Gary made a short sound, the kind that was not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh. "See," he said. "You are doing it right now, making it into a debate. You will cause drama. You are too intense." He said intense the way some people say dangerous, like it explained everything without needing evidence. I felt something rise in my chest. Not anger, not surprise, but that old familiar sting of being described as a problem, because I refused to shrink. I did not give him the reaction he wanted. I asked again, quieter. "So you planned this. You told people I could not make it. You told me it was casual. You told everyone else something else." Gary did not deny it. He pivoted, which was worse. "People will ask questions," he said. "You know how it is. Your job, your schedule, your whole situation. It is awkward for people. We do not need that at Tyler's party." The word awkward hung there thin and sharp. It was not about my job. It was about the fact that my job reminded him he did not get to define me. It reminded him there were places I belonged that he could not control. Diane's voice came back faintly in the background. "Reese, please." Gary spoke over her. "Tyler does not need distractions," he said. "This is his moment. Do not compete." "Do you hear yourself?" I asked. Compete. By showing up as his sister. Gary ignored the question. Then his tone changed smoother, managerial, like he was offering a compromise instead of demanding a cover-up. "Here is what you are going to do," he said. "You are going to post something nice. A congratulations. Something public. Make it look like you could not come because of work. That way nobody keeps asking where you are, and your mother does not have to answer uncomfortable questions." For a second I did not speak. Not because I did not know what to say, but because the audacity was so clean I needed a moment to let it land. They did not just want me out of the room. They wanted me to help lock the door behind myself. They wanted me to sign off on the lie so they could point to my own words as proof that nothing unfair had happened. Diane tried again, softer, desperate. "Reese, it would help. Please." I felt my throat tighten. Not tears, not yet. Just pressure. I stayed quiet for a few seconds, long enough that Gary shifted on the other end, impatient, irritated, that I was not complying. "Say it," he pressed. "Just post it and stop making this harder." In my family, harder always meant visible. I inhaled once, slow. "I am not doing that," I said. Diane made a small sound like she had been slapped by the idea of my refusal. Gary's voice sharpened. "What do you mean you are not doing it?" "I mean, I am not lying for you," I said, still controlled. "You lied. You handle it." The line went still. Then Gary did what he always did when control slipped. He tried to make my boundary sound like cruelty. "Your mother has enough stress," he snapped. "Tyler has worked hard. Do not ruin this for him." There it was again, the threat soft at the edges, but heavy at the center. If anything went wrong tonight, it would be because I did not cooperate. I did not raise my voice. I did not plead my case. I just let the truth sit between us like a weight. I am not ruining anything I said. Your lie is the problem. Then I ended the call before they could turn my words into another argument. My phone stayed in my hand screen, dark, my reflection faint on the glass. For a moment I stood there, still feeling the ache settle into place. This was the part that pushed me closest to the edge, not the exclusion, not the insults, but the expectation that I would help them erase me and call it peace. The buzz came a few minutes later, not from family, from a number saved under a name that never used extra words. Schedule shift. Brief window moved up. Report NLT 1830. Be ready. The message was short, efficient, the kind that assumed competence. A second message followed with a detail about an expected presence at the community center later that night, a small recognition stop connected to community standards and leadership visibility. Information most people would not know until it happened. I stared at the screen, and something cold and clear settled under the hurt. Funny, I thought. The people lying about me never know what is already scheduled. I set the phone down, not trembling now, not rushing, just deciding. I would not play by my family's rules. I would play by the rules I trusted. If you have ever been pressured to cover for a lie just to keep someone else comfortable, you will understand exactly why I did what came next. So I followed protocol. Not as an act of defiance, not as a performance, but because it was the only rule set that had never lied to me. I did not dress for a party. I did not stand in front of the mirror wondering how I would be perceived or whether my presence would make anyone uncomfortable. I dressed the way I always did when something mattered, clean, simple, functional. Hair-secured boots, polished just enough to pass without comment, clothes that said I was there to do a job and nothing else. I checked the time twice, not out of nerves but habit. Timing matters. Being early is sloppy. Being late is disrespectful. I grabbed the folder I had been told to bring, thin but specific, the kind of thing that only exists inside systems most people never see. No decorations, no gift bag, no speech written in my head. I was not going to prove anything. I was going to do what I had been assigned to do. I am not going there to show them who I am, I told myself as I locked the door behind me. I am going there because this is where I am supposed to be. The drive across town was quiet. Killeen at night has a way of settling into itself. Streetlights humming, the same few trucks circling familiar routes, the glow of the community center visible from a distance like a small island of noise and light. I kept the radio off. I did not need distraction. I ran through the brief in my head, not word for word, just the outline. Community engagement. Recognition stop. Short window. No theatrics. In and out. On the way, my phone rang once. I answered without checking the screen. "Yes," I said. The voice on the other end was clipped, efficient, familiar in its lack of filler. "Confirmed," they said. "You have the packet." "I do. Door on the west side. You will be met." "Understood." That was it. No reassurance, no explanation, just trust built on repetition. I hung up and exhaled slowly. They knew where I would be. They knew when. They knew what I would need. That was the difference between chaos and structure. As I pulled into the lot, I could already hear it. Laughter spilling out through the glass doors, music low but present, the sound of chairs scraping and people greeting each other with the easy confidence of belonging. I parked farther out, not out of hesitation, but because the spaces near the entrance were already full. Families, friends, people who had been told where they belonged tonight. I sat for a moment with the engine off, hands resting on the wheel, letting the noise wash over me. There was a time when this would have hurt more sharply, when the idea of being outside a room like this would have made me feel smaller. Tonight it was different. The hurt was there, but it was contained, folded neatly into the back of my mind where it would not interfere. I stepped out of the car and straightened without thinking, posture snapping into place, the way it always did when I crossed a threshold that mattered. I walked toward the building, not rushing, not lingering. At the west side entrance, a single door stood apart from the main glass front, less visible, more utilitarian. I stopped there, adjusted the folder under my arm, and waited. From where I stood, I could hear fragments through the wall. Tyler's name, someone clinking a glass, applause rising and falling. I pictured the stage, the flags, the photographer angling for the right shot. I pictured my mother smiling too hard. Gary scanning the room, satisfied that everything looked the way he wanted it to look. And I felt that familiar twist of irony. There are rooms you help build for other people, rooms you protect, rooms you make possible through work no one ever sees. And then there are rooms you are told not to enter because your presence would complicate the picture. The door opened from the inside, and a man I recognized but had never met in this context nodded once. "Reese," he said, not a question. "This way." I followed him down a short hallway that muffled the noise of the party, the sound fading just enough to make space for my thoughts. We stopped near the edge of the main room, just outside the line of sight of most of the guests. I could see Tyler now laughing with someone near the stage, unaware of how close everything was to shifting. I stayed where I was told. Still. Waiting. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. I did not check it. I already knew what it would say. Be ready. That was always the message. I looked down at my hands, steady, empty of anything decorative. No flowers, no envelope. Just the folder and the quiet certainty of purpose. The pain crept back in then, not overwhelming but present. This was my brother. This was a moment families were supposed to share. I let myself feel that for a beat longer than was comfortable. Then I set it aside. There is a discipline in knowing when to feel and when to act. I heard my name before I saw anyone turn, not shouted, not announced, just spoken with recognition, the kind that carries weight without raising volume. Reese. The sound of it cut through the room in a way laughter never could. A few heads turned, then a few more. I took one step forward, not into the spotlight, just closer to where I had been directed. Somewhere behind me, someone murmured something that sounded like confusion. I did not look for my mother. I did not look for Gary. I focused on the task, on the sequence of what came next, on the simple truth that had carried me this far. I was not here to argue. I was not here to explain myself. I was here because the system had put me here. I reached the edge of the doorway that led fully into the room, close enough now that I could feel the shift in attention, the subtle tightening of the air when a situation stops following the script people expected. My hand brushed the doorframe fingers resting there for half a second. Inside, someone laughed a little too loudly. Someone else said my name again, this time with a question attached to it. I stepped closer to the threshold, aware of the moment stretching, aware that once I crossed it, there would be no pretending nothing had changed. Do not skip ahead. In just a few seconds, you will see what happens when a room realizes it was wrong about who belonged in it. I stepped through the doorway like I belonged there because, in the only system that mattered tonight, I did. For the first 2 seconds, nobody recognized me. Not in the way people recognize family at a party. They saw a uniformed figure moving with purpose near the edge of the room, not a guest searching for a seat, not a sister rushing to hug the promoted soldier, just someone who looked like they had a reason to be there. The room was warm with noise, conversations layered over each other. Glasses clinked. Someone laughed near the buffet line. The photographer floated through it all, hunting for clean angles, turning faces toward the flags, capturing the kind of smiles that look effortless when the truth is being held out of frame. Tyler was near the stage, half turned toward a small group of guard friends, his posture proud without being cocky. He deserved that. That was the painful part. He deserved it, and I would have been happy for him if they had let me show up as his sister instead of treating me like a risk. I kept my eyes forward. I did not scan the room for my mother. I did not search for Gary. I did not make a face. I just walked to where I had been directed, stopping a few steps inside, close enough to be seen but not centered. That was when a voice cut through the noise with a calm that made everything else feel suddenly cheap. Sergeant Reese. It was not shouted. It did not need to be. It carried the kind of recognition that makes people straighten without realizing they are doing it. The room did something strange. The laughter faded first, like someone had turned down a speaker. Then conversation slowed, then stopped. One by one, heads turned toward me, not because I demanded attention, but because someone with authority had just named me in a way that meant I mattered. The guest of honor stood near the stage, a senior leader in a clean uniform, the kind of presence that does not need to announce itself to be felt. He looked at me with a brief nod, professional, familiar, as if seeing me here was expected. I returned the nod. That was all. The silence held. The photographer lowered his camera by instinct, not wanting to capture the wrong moment. Tyler turned, fully confusion flickering across his face, before it settled into something else. Recognition, not of who I was to him as a sibling, but of how I was being addressed. That was a different language, one Tyler understood in his bones. He looked at me the way you look at someone you have underestimated because you did not have the full picture. For a second, he did not move. Then he took one step forward, slow, cautious, as if he was afraid the moment would snap if he moved too fast. Diane was near the front row of chairs. I saw her hand lift toward her throat, the gesture small, automatic. Gary stood beside her shoulders, squared smile already forming and failing at the same time. He did not know which version of himself to be yet. The senior leader's gaze shifted past me across the room, landing on Tyler, then on Diane, then on Gary, with the kind of polite focus that feels like a spotlight. He did not raise his voice. He did not accuse anyone. He asked a simple question, and it landed like a weight because there was no good answer. "I thought she was family," he said evenly. "Why was she not invited?" The words hung in the air. For a moment, nobody moved. The silence was not dramatic. It was stunned, the kind that happens when a room realizes it has been participating in something without understanding it. Gary reacted first because controlling the story was his reflex. He stepped forward half a pace, hands open, as if he were calming everyone down. "Sir," he began, smiling too hard. "There has been some miscommunication. Reese could not make it. Work, you know how it is." "Work." He glanced toward me like I would help him, like I would nod along and make his lie look cooperative. I did not. I said nothing. I kept my posture neutral and my eyes steady. The senior leader did not respond to Gary's performance with anger. He responded with a sentence that was colder precisely because it stayed polite. "That is not what I was told," he said. The room shifted again. You could feel it the way people feel a foundation crack before they see the fracture. Gary blinked, smile tightening. Diane made a small noise like she wanted to disappear. Tyler's face went still, and I watched the moment the story he had been given started to fall apart in his head. The senior leader turned slightly toward the man who had escorted me in, then toward me. "Sergeant Reese has something to deliver for this community recognition stop," he said, matter of fact, as if that alone explained why I was here. I stepped forward, opened the folder, and handed over what I had been assigned to hand over. A formal acknowledgement packet, cleanly prepared, the kind of thing that exists because someone did the work early and correctly. It was not flashy. It did not make the room clap. But it was proof of purpose, and purpose changes how people see you. I did not look at the crowd while I did it. I did not look at my mother. I did not look at Gary. I focused on the sequence, the steps, the small professional exchange that made this moment unavoidable. The senior leader accepted the packet, then looked back out at the room. He did not lecture. He did not moralize. He said one line calm enough to sound almost casual, and it hit harder than any shouting ever could. "She is the one I called first," he said. The words were simple, but everyone in that room understood what they implied. He had not called my mother first. He had not called Gary. He had not called Tyler. He had called me. A few guests exchanged glances. The older veterans in the crowd, the ones who had served long enough to recognize competence, watched with a different kind of attention now. Gary's face changed, the confidence draining out of it in real time. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, he had no line that fit. The senior leader's eyes moved to Gary again, not hostile, just firm. "Whatever personal issues exist," he said evenly, "they do not erase the responsibilities she has been carrying. And they do not give anyone permission to belittle her service or her role." He did not say Gary's name. He did not need to. The room knew who that was for. Tyler swallowed. Then slowly he stepped closer to me, not like a brother trying to smooth things over, but like a soldier recognizing another soldier. "Reese," he said quietly, and it sounded different than it ever had. Not irritated, not cautious, almost respectful. I met his eyes for a beat. I did not smile. I did not punish him either. I let him see the truth without dressing it up. Behind him, Diane looked like she might cry, but her eyes kept darting toward the guests, toward the photographer, toward the exits, calculating what this would cost her socially. Gary stood frozen, trapped between anger and embarrassment, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he could not say out loud in front of this many witnesses. This was his nightmare. Not being exposed as cruel in private, but being exposed as small in public. The senior leader turned slightly back toward Tyler, returning the room to the purpose of the night with professional grace. "Congratulations on your promotion," he said, and the applause that followed was hesitant, fractured, because everyone was still processing what they had just seen. Tyler nodded, but his eyes kept flicking back to me. Not to blame me, not this time. To understand. If you have ever watched a bully lose their voice the moment real authority walks in, you already know why this was only the beginning. The room never went back to the way it was before. That was the first consequence, subtle but irreversible. Conversations restarted, but they did not sound the same. Laughter came in short bursts instead of flowing easily. People who had been standing close to Gary drifted away without announcing it, bodies angling toward other clusters, eyes avoiding his. This was not dramatic rejection. It was something worse for him. It was quiet assessment. Veterans in the room, the older ones with creased faces and posture that never fully relaxed, did not say anything at all. They did not need to. One man near the back gave Gary a long look, slow and unblinking, then turned his back. Another leaned toward his wife and murmured something she nodded at without smiling. These were people who had lived long enough to recognize when respect had been misused, when someone had mistaken authority at home for authority everywhere. Diane broke first. I heard it before I saw it. The sharp inhale she took when she realized the room was no longer cooperating with the version of the evening she had planned. Tears gathered quickly, not the quiet kind, but the visible kind that signals distress meant to be noticed. She pressed a hand to her face, shoulders folding inward as if she were the one who had been wronged. A woman beside her reached out, hesitated, then settled for a gentle pat on the arm that did not quite comfort. Diane was crying for her image, not for me. That was another consequence. Gary reacted the only way he knew how. He pivoted. His eyes found me across the room, sharp, now accusing. He stepped toward me, lowering his voice, but not his intent. "You embarrassed us," he said, the word us heavy, with implication. "You could have handled this privately." I looked at him for a moment, not challenging, not apologetic. I did not answer. There was nothing I could say that would not be twisted into further proof of his grievance. Silence did more work than explanation ever could. Tyler stood between us without meaning to. He had shifted closer to me at some point, and now he looked from Gary to me, confusion deepening into something harder. "Did you really lie to her?" he asked Gary, his voice low but audible. The question landed with more force than any accusation. Gary scoffed too quickly. "That is not what happened," he said. "You do not understand the whole situation." Tyler did not let it go. His jaw tightened. "Then explain it to me," he said. "Because what I just heard does not line up with what you told me." Diane sobbed louder as if to drown out the conversation, but it only drew more eyes. The senior leader returned to the front, briefly offered a few closing words to the group, then gestured toward Tyler. They spoke quietly, heads inclined toward each other, the kind of conversation that is not meant for everyone but is impossible to ignore. Tyler listened intently, nodding once then again, his expression changing with each sentence. I did not hear what was said, but I did not need to. I saw the effect. Tyler looked at Gary afterward like he was seeing him clearly for the first time. Not as a provider, not as a gatekeeper, as a man who had made a choice and was now standing in the consequences of it. Someone touched my elbow gently. "Reese," they said. "This way." I followed the motion without question, stepping away from the center of the room toward a quieter corner near the side hallway. People shifted to make space subtle but unmistakable. A few nodded as I passed, not warmly, not familiarly, but with recognition. The language changed again, not emotional, not professional. I stood with two people I had only ever spoken to on calls or in passing the conversation, efficient and focused. Brief confirmations. A note about follow-up. A timeline adjustment. Nothing that would make sense to anyone listening in, and that was the point. I was not performing authority. I was operating within it. When the brief ended, I thanked them and stepped back toward the main room. The path opened without effort. That alone would have been enough to tell Gary what he had lost. He hovered near the edge of the crowd, now restless eyes darting, scanning reactions the way a man scans exits. When he approached me again, his tone had changed. "Reese," he said, quieter, urgent. "We need to fix this. People are getting the wrong idea." He glanced around as if the room itself were a witness he needed to discredit. "Just say it was a misunderstanding. Post something. Tell them it was miscommunication. You do not have to make it worse." Panic bargaining had arrived. This was the point where he would trade anything to regain control of the narrative, even humility if it served him. I studied him for a moment, really looked. The confidence he wore so easily at home was gone. In its place was fear, not of me, but of exposure. Of losing standing among people whose respect he could not force. I did not agree. I did not argue. I simply said, "I am not doing that," and stepped past him. Behind me, he called my name again, sharper now, but it did not stop me. Diane cried harder, telling anyone who would listen that this was not how the night was supposed to go. Tyler stayed near the front, no longer celebrating asking questions he had never asked before. The party did not end abruptly. It faded, people leaving earlier than planned, conversations unfinished, energy drained. As I stood near the exit, waiting for the right moment to leave, I felt the weight of what had happened settle in. No triumph, no satisfaction. Just the quiet certainty that something fundamental had shifted. Gary had not broken yet, but he was close. And the closer he got, the more obvious it became that he would not survive it by forcing someone else to carry the load. A week after the party, the noise finally settled into something you could measure. That is how consequences work in military towns. Nothing stays private for long, But it also does not turn into chaos. It turns into reputation. People remember who held themselves with dignity and who tried to rewrite reality when the truth got inconvenient. I went back to my routine. Early mornings, tight schedules, the kind of days that leave little room for spiraling. I did not post about the party. I did not call relatives to give my side. I did not chase validation. I let the facts stand where they had been exposed in a room full of witnesses. Tyler texted me once short, "Can we talk?" I replied, just as short. "When you are ready to be honest, yes." He did not push. That mattered more than any apology he could have typed. Diane called twice. I did not answer. I listened to one voicemail and stopped there. She cried, said she did not sleep, said she felt humiliated, said the community was judging them. She never said she was sorry I had been excluded. She was sorry it had looked bad. She was sorry it had been seen. Gary did not call until the following Thursday. His name on my screen still triggered something automatic in my body, a small tightening and instinct to brace. I answered anyway, not because I wanted to hear him, but because I wanted to stop being afraid of my own phone. "Reese," he said, and the tone was different. Lower, measured. The voice of a man trying on humility because his usual tools had failed. "We need to talk." I kept my voice flat. "About what?" "About fixing things," he said quickly. "About making sure the story out there does not get twisted." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. He did not call to apologize. He called to manage optics. I did not react. "Gary," I said, "I am not interested in adjusting the story." There was a pause, then a small exhale like he was forcing patience. "Look," he said, "I am trying here. You know how people are. They talk. It is getting back to Tyler's unit friends, to the community, to people who have opinions. We should present a united front. United front." The phrase tasted like old pressure. That was always what he wanted. Not unity, compliance. I said nothing for a beat, then answered simply, "I am not available." His voice tightened. "Reese, do not do that," he said. "Do not be cold. We are family." The word family landed wrong coming from him. "You should ask the people you treated like family," I said. Another pause, longer this time. His tone shifted again, and now I could hear the actual reason underneath the call. He needed something. He cleared his throat. "Tyler is having an issue with some benefits paperwork," he said. "It is tied to the promotion and a couple of administrative things. There is also a community support program he wants to apply for, and the deadlines are coming up. They are asking for documentation, and it is a bit complicated. Your mother said you would know how to handle it." There it was, audacity dressed up as necessity. They had excluded me from the celebration, lied about it, tried to force me into their cover story, then turned around, expecting me to carry the administrative load when it served them. The request was not outrageous on its own. Paperwork happens. Benefit systems are confusing. Community support programs have rules. In a healthy family, you help because you want to. In my family, I was expected to help because they felt entitled to my competence. I answered the way I would answer a tasking I was not assigned. "I am not available," I repeated. Gary went quiet. Then the irritation bled through his careful tone. "Reese," he said, "do you hear yourself? Tyler is your brother. This affects his future. This is not the time to hold grudges." I felt the old guilt reach for me, the reflex that had kept me in my role for years. Then I thought of the party again. Of the way he had said you are not invited as if it were obvious. Of the way he had told me to post a lie. Of the way Diane had cried for her image while I stood there being treated like an inconvenience. "This is not a grudge," I said. "It is a boundary." Gary's voice snapped back into its familiar shape. "After everything we did for you," he said, sharp now, "after all the support we gave you, this is how you repay us." The sentence came out fast, practiced like he had been saving it. I did not raise my voice. I did not argue point by point. I simply said what mattered because veterans understand that you do not win by talking the most. You win by staying on mission. "You did not support me," I said. You used me when it was convenient. You excluded me from my brother's milestone. You lied to everyone, including me. Then you tried to force me to participate in the lie so you could look better. That is the core of it." There was silence on the line, thick and stunned. I continued, still calm. "I am not punishing you. I am refusing to carry consequences for choices you made. If you need help now, ask the people you chose to protect and prioritize. Ask the version of family you performed for the room." Gary inhaled sharply, and for a moment I thought he might soften. Instead, he reached for control one last time. "You are tearing this family apart," he said. I answered without hesitation. "You tore it apart when you decided I did not belong in the room." Then I ended the call. The aftermath was not dramatic. It was practical, which is what made it real. Tyler had to handle his own paperwork. Diane had to make calls to offices she had avoided for years. Gary had to show his face in community spaces, knowing people had seen him exposed. And in a military town, that kind of exposure is not loud, but it sticks. Tyler came by my apartment 2 days later. He stood outside my door like he did not know if he deserved to knock. When I opened it, he looked tired. "I owe you," he said. "Not money, not paperwork, an acknowledgement. I did not invite you because I let them tell me a story that was easier than the truth." I did not answer right away. I watched his face, the way his eyes did not dart, the way he held still, like a man trying to stand in accountability without flinching. I finally said then, "Do not do it again." He nodded once. And then he said something I did not expect. "I am setting boundaries with Gary," he said. "If he cannot respect you, he does not get access to me the way he used to." That was the real consequence. Not humiliation, not gossip, a shift in allegiance toward integrity. After Tyler left, I sat in my living room with the lights low, the quiet deep. No victory lap, no satisfaction, just peace. I thought about something older veterans understand better than anyone. At 50, you do not fear being disliked. You fear wasting your dignity on people who never planned to respect it. I made tea. I cleaned my kitchen. I folded laundry. Ordinary tasks, steadying tasks, the kind that remind you life continues when you stop begging for a seat at a table that was never built for you. If you have lived through a family like this, leave one sentence in the comments. What age did you learn to set a boundary and finally mean it?